I've got six different stories to cover with regards to news around the world. This is the World's News Round. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is ReganElite here with an episode of the World's News Round. Because I didn't do a Snowflake's Corner, I felt compelled in myself to do a news round of some of the world's news stories. So I hope you guys find these fascinating as interesting as I do. And we start with The Guardian with the headline, with an analysis more of it rather than a headline. China's muted reaction to Taiwan's elections result may signal a waiting game, writes Helen Davidson and Amy Hopkins in Taipei. Taiwan says China's significant joint air and sea patrols but analysis say Beijing's reaction to the ruling Democratic Progressive Party's election win has so far been relatively quiet. So I was curious to see how China would respond with the outcome of the Taiwan election, and it appears to be very mute as of right now. But things can change, no doubt. And I said this before when I talked about it in the election video, guys, is that Xi Jinping wants Taiwan back. What I mean by Taiwan back. What I mean is that they want there to be only one Chinese state, only one Chinese party. There can only be one China. At the moment, we're still in a world where there are two Chinas, and one is Taiwan, and one is the Communist People's Republic of China, the Communist Party in China. And one of the things that he will want in his legacy as the China's president is to bring Taiwan back into the fold. Now, ideally, they would like it to be done by diplomacy, and the same political party that Taiwan has elected has been the same one that's been in power since 2016. There hasn't been really another one that's been able to. One of the other parties had the intention of being a bit more softer towards China. That could hopefully maybe make some gains, but it appears that the Taiwanese people are very clear that they don't want to be under the thumb of China. Where is this going to go? I do fear that a war is coming for Taiwan. I do fear it's coming. When, how, remains to be seen. But trust me, just because it's quiet now does not mean it's going to be quiet in the future. And I generally believe that Xi Jinping, before his time, will want to take back Taiwan. I mean, if that means potentially them going to war with America, which I know sounds pretty crazy, he may potentially do that. But we'll have to wait and see, obviously. So, China conducted joint combat patrols around Taiwan on Wednesday in a potential presumption of military intimidation after Taiwan's presidential election last weekend. But analysis say the reaction of China's ruling Communist Party has been relatively muted so far, despite successes of the Taiwanese ruling Democratic Progressive Party, the DPP, with Beijing loathes as separatists in retaining the presidency. On Thursday morning, Taiwan's defense ministry reported that People's Liberation Army had sent 24 planes and 5 Navy vessels into Taiwanese air defense identification zones in the past 24 hours, the first incursions of significant size since November. The air and sea craft conducted joint patrols, including crossing the unofficial maritime border, the Median line is said. The patrol follows a shock announcement on Monday that the government of No was severing ties with Taiwan and switching reconciliation to China. The 10th diplomat ally of Taiwan that Beijing has managed to flip since the DPP and President Tai Wan-jing won the 2016 election. Beijing has also issued angry statements over other governments that congratulated President-elect Yang Jing on his win. English-language state media, especially the hawkish Global Times tabloid, has run dozens of negative articles and editorial pieces about the election. However, but beyond those incidences, Beijing's reaction to the election has been relatively muted, approaching nowhere near the scales of its previous outbursts over particularly acts by Taiwan, such as the visit of the then US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan, or the US meeting between Tai Zi-wing and Pelosi's successor Kevin McCarthy. It's interesting. I'm curious to know where Trump is going to stand if he gets into power at the next presidential election. What's his position going to be with Taiwan? Is he really going to back Taiwan to the hill? Because we know he has no problem with going to a trade war with China. He's come close to that. So where is his position? Is he really going to? How much of a staunch supporter of Taiwan is he going to be? Is a question. I mean, one of the ways he can really rattle them if he really wanted to was go and visit Taiwan, but that would cause unimaginable tension. It's a pretty positive start to this period, but I think we also need to see what will happen. It's a very interactive situation, said Amanda Hispo, a Tapani-based Senator China analysis with the International Crisis Group. China engaged in influence operations ahead of the Taiwan's vote, but visibly reduced its military activity, which analysis had linked to a perception that any threatening activity would possibly boost the pro-sovereign DPP. Analysis also point to recent significant improvements that the China-US relationship. It's not like Beijing just decided to. There's been a concerted attempt by Washington and Taipei to signal continuously and to lower temperatures, said Heiskell. A key factor for why China's response has been measured, perhaps the most important, is they don't want to tear up the gains made in improving US-China relations. I think that's also a significant point. You know, the relationship between the US and China when it comes to economics, world trade, the global economy, it really does affect the entire world if there aren't relationships of some sorts between them two. I think I do think they are important, despite the historical events between China and Taiwan. There is that muted between the two as well. However, a stronger response may come when Li is inaugurated in May. Jia Chong, a political scientist at the National University of Singapore, said there is likely to be an increased pressure from Beijing in the lead-up, as it probably wants to see how much it can get Li to concede, and then to hold him into their interpretations of those concessions. Li is not expected to deliver what Beijing wants, which would effectively be a reversal of the DPP's platform of resisting China's claims and promoting Taiwan's sovereignty. Beijing often waits for a justification for its actions, and as we know, Li is going to give them that because he's not going to say what they want him to say, said Hiskio. That alone means Beijing will have something to point out to if they want to point to something to justify a larger response. But Hiskio said the size and intensity of what that response shouldn't be assumed, and would depend on how Beijing, Taipei and Washington communicate and interact in the build-up. Chong said Beijing will probably try and test or gloat Li into provocation after his inauguration. The PRC, the People's Republic of China, is probably going to see if they can force Li into making a mistake or frustrating him into making a rash move, which they can then paint as Li being proactive and seek international agreements on. A continuation, if not intensification. The election result was closely watched inside China, and the DPP's lack of a mandate for both the presidential and legislative votes prompted increased discussions about winning over Taiwanese people through a non-violent means, while still preparing for a military intervention. An increasing majority of Taiwan's population rejects the prospect of a Chinese rule, but that majority win allowed China's Taiwan's Affairs Office to argue on Sunday that the DPP does not represent the mainstream public's opinion on the island. On Monday, parts of the 2022 speech by China's leader Xi Jinping, who was previously describing unification of Taiwan with China as a historical inevitability, were newly published in state media urging CCP workers to do better at winning the hearts and minds of Taiwanese people, and to develop and strengthen their patriotic pro-unification forces in Taiwan and oppose the separatist acts of a Taiwan independence. Chong said, at face value, the Xi speech suggests a continuation, if not intensification, of congenerative psychological, economic and political pressure in the form of isolating Taiwan, co-opting entities and individuals in Taiwan, placing pressures on Taiwanese businesses, disinformation and the like. In an article published the day after the vote, Zhang Yongfeng, a professor of international relations of the Chinese University of Hong Kong, Shazing wrote, "There is a need to actively win over the new forces of Generation Z to promote the resolution of the Taiwan issue in the new era. We must pay attention to initiative cross-strait communication platforms, focusing on the use of new media platforms such as Jiachongchu and Dolo2 to calculate and change the identity of young people in Taiwan. In recent years, there has been a growing concern in some circles that popularity of Chinese social media apps among the young Taiwanese is influencing Generation Z into a more pro-Chinese worldview." That's the non-violent way that China are going to do this, but that is, sorry, wrong button there. But that's going to be a very long thing to do. Now, it is entirely possible that they can do it that way by influencing the younger generation into liking China and influencing them via their apps and all that kind of stuff to kind of gain some influence from the younger generation as they grow into the next generation. But is Xi Jinping prepared to do that? Like I said at the start of the video, I don't think he is. I generally think he will consider military intervention because he will not want this to continue forever. He will, but at the same time, guys, there is that incredible tension. He doesn't want to start a war with America, even though that there's part of me feels that he is prepared, may even be prepared to do that to get Taiwan back because of the traditional history there. The history cannot be ignored by the People's Republic of China. They want Taiwan. They want it back. They want that land back. They want it that there can only be one China. And that's the same mindset that Taiwan has with the People's Republic of China. But they know they can't engage and take on China along, and they don't want aggression. They kind of just want to be left alone. I feel it's a tough call. But I think the result was expected in this outcome. But there will be more hissy fighting, handbags thrown, shall we say. The tension will come back again between the two nations, if not throughout the year. You'll see them pop up in my short feeds. I'm sure of it. That China will cause an aggro and tension. It's not going away anytime soon, guys. So the next one we got is from Al Jazeera, guys, and this is regarding the attacks from the Houthis. The US have stated that they're not at war with the Houthis. Biden admits the strikes were not halting attacks. Strikes are not halting their attacks. Remarks after the US conducted its fifth round of strikes against targets in Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen. So one of the things that to understand a little bit of context of why the Houthis doing this, why are Americans retaliating, why are British and other Western allies are getting involved. What is this all about? So let me try and break this down as best as I can. So the Houthis, rebels, as they're called by a number of times, but I'm going to call them Houdini rebels for preference here, who control parts of area of Yemen, and they are backed by the Iran government, the revolutionary Iran. And the Saudis back the main government in Yemen. So essentially, there is a civil war here. There's a lot of history here. And one of the things that Iran, who are supplying the weapons and procurements of the Houthis in the area of Yemen, one of the things that they want is the war in Gaza to stop. The Hamas, the Israel Palestine conflict that's taking place in Gaza, they want the Israelis to stop the ceasefire, to stop firing on and stop the bloodshed there. And they have stated, the Houthis have made this clear, they have stated that they will stop disruption in the Red Sea, within the Red Sea, where the trade lies between Yemen and Africa, down that strait into the Suez Canal, where international trade is made between mainly Europe and Asia. They promise to stop the disruption there if a ceasefire is made, essentially, is what they have said. And instead of the West pressuring Israel to do that, which would de-escalate a lot of tension within the Middle East, because we all know that would de-escalate tension, instead they decided to ignore that and instead strike the Houthis and target specific targets in them, in an attempt to basically tell them to stop attacking innocent ships. And this has also had a global trade has been affected by this, because a lot of trade now has essentially stopped going through that canal, simply because of the Houthis and the threats of their attacks. There has been some U.S., British, and other Western allies have military bases on the other side of the strait, and there are some patrols out there, but some of them still get targeted by Houthis. Now, President Biden does not want to go to war with the Houthi rebels, especially when it's an election year. Considering that one of the couple of things that he's done this year is he's pulled American forces out of Afghanistan, and he's also pulled forces out of the conflict within Yemen. This war, originally the US was supporting Saudi Arabia in this war with the Houthis, and America has pulled out of that as well. So they really don't want to be going in there militarily and doing all that. Especially when Americans, the vast majority of Americans, do not want to be seeing resources and money going towards other nations, when they're more concerned about America first. Hence the whole why there's a growing feeling among Americans why they really are becoming anti-Ukrainian, because they don't like the amount of money and support that Ukraine are getting from America as well. So I hope that kind of clears up a little bit and helps. Obviously, there is a lot more to this, but let's read into this, guys. So, the US President Joe Biden has pledged to continue strikes against Yemen's Houthis, even as he admitted that military action against the rebel group has failed to halt attacks on commercial shipping. Biden made remarks on Thursday after the US conducted its fifth round of strikes against targets in Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen. The U.S. Central Commander CENTCOM said in a statement that it had destroyed 2 anti-ship missiles after determining they were an immediate threat to merchant vessels and U.S. Navy ships in the region. Asked by reporters if the strikes against the rebel group were working, Biden acknowledged that they had not stopped attacks on international shipping in the Red Sea. Well, when you say working, are they stopping the Houthis? No, Biden said. Are they going to continue? Yes. Pentagon spokesperson Sabina Sheikh said in a later briefing that Houthis would have to make the decision to stop the attacks. We never said that the Houthis would immediately stop, Sheikh said, adding that it was in the group's best interest to halt the attacks. You've seen what we've been able to degrade and severely disrupt and destroy a significant number of their capabilities since Thursday. But it's really on them when they decide when they want to stop interrupting commercial shipping, innocent mariners, and are transitioning the Red Sea. Sheikh has also said the US did not consider itself to be at war with Houthis and that its actions are in self-defense. We don't think that we are at war. We don't want to see a regional war, Sheikh said. The Houthis are one that continue to launch cruise missiles, anti-ship missiles at innocent mariners, at commercial vessels that are just transiting in the area that's seized. 10 to 15% of the world's commerce. Like I said, global trade's been affected by this as well. The Houthis said in a statement later on Thursday that it had carried out a missile attack on the US ship Clem Ranger in the Gulf of Aden, resulted in direct hits. CENTCOM said the rebels had launched 2 missiles at a US-owned tanker, but they missed their target. The Iran-backed Houthis have carried out repeated attacks on cargo ships in the Red Sea, a major conduct for global trade, and a show of support for Palestine under Israeli bombardment in Gaza. More than 24 vessels have been attacked by the group since they seized the Israeli-linked Galaxy Leader vessel in November. The attacks have forced some of the world's largest shipping operators to redirect their vessels around the southern tip of Africa, severely disrupting global trade. The US and its partners last month launched a multinational force Operation Prosperity Guardian in order to protect commercial vessels from drones and missile attacks in the waterway. I'm also going to put a link to a YouTuber called RealLifeLore, who did a fascinating video on this story as well. I would strongly recommend. It's about 37 minutes long, but it really does explain quite a lot of it. I'm going to put that link in. Definitely worth checking out his channel. Very knowledgeable. Extremely knowledgeable, so definitely have a look at that if you guys can do. But what are my final thoughts on it? I mean, something has to give. The attacks on the Houthis will not stop unless America kind of forces and its Western allies kind of force their hand. It's gonna be. It's the thing is, we all know that this tensions can calm down if they simply just talk Israel out of stopping the killing of innocent Palestinians. You know, a lot of tension within the whole of the Middle East can de-escalate significantly if they do that. But they're kind of just sitting on their laurels, allowing innocent Palestinians to die in Gaza, and it's not right. You know, it's not right what's happening there. It really isn't. So this one we got from CNN. Interesting story to say the least here. I know it's cut off, but I'll explain. So the headline is: the number of North Korean defectors have nearly tripled in 2023, including elite diplomats, South Korea says. So again, so for some context, obviously North Korea and South Korea, over the last several years in particular, North Korea has really clamped down on. It really has become pretty much a prison. For people in North Korea, any kind of knowledge or information or anything regarding the outside world is kind of like cut off, unless you have the strictest of permissions from the North Korean state to go out of it or acquire anything from there, which is near to next impossible. And you can't even, and this is even more crazier as well, you can't even go from one state to another in North Korea without the government knowing about it. Like that's how much 24/7 surveillance is literally on you. Like, it really is, and the punishments are severe. And the thing is that the worst thing is that while the border between North and South Korea is extremely, there's a huge amount of security on both sides for obvious reasons. The security is not so much as high when it comes to China and Russia, the borders that they have there, because if people defecting North Korea and try to get to South Korea, it's very difficult for them to get there from fleeing China and Russia, because they have agreements with North Korea that anybody who flees North Korea is caught by Chinese or Russian people are sent straight back to the country, where they'll face either execution or basically life imprisonment, severe punishment. Which is why it's incredibly dangerous for them to. I mean, even if you were to make the trip to Mongolia from there, that's a very long trip. I mean, there's still a high possibility you can get caught. It's really scary, to say the least. But apparently people are still desperately trying to get out, despite all the odds. So the number of North Korean defectors entering South Korea nearly tripled in 2023 compared to the previous 2 years, authorities said Thursday, including the high number of youth and members in the North Korean elite. South Korea's Unification Ministry recorded 196 defectors entering the country last year, it said in the briefing. More than half were in their 20s, 30s, and about 84% were women and girls, according to the government's data. The total figure is just a fraction of pre-pandemic levels. 1,047 defectors arrived in 2019, but still marks a significant rise after the steep decline during the COVID-19 pandemic. North Korea slammed its already tight borders shut in 2020, plunging the hermit nation into even greater isolation. Only 63 defectors entered South Korea in 2021 and 67 in 2022, according to the government's data. The country began reopening somewhat in 2023, allowing citizens living abroad to return and resuming international flights or certain countries including China and Russia. But the Unification Ministry said some North Koreans living overseas chose not to return and instead fled to the south. Ooh, that's new to me. So I was not aware of this. I was not aware that citizens could fly. I was not aware that citizens were allowed to fly out to the likes of China and Russia here. That's interesting. I did not know that. About 10 of what it described the elite North Koreans were among those who defected last year, the highest number of this group since 2017, according to the ministry. They include diplomats, other officials and students based overseas who were told to return last year as the pandemic situation entered a new phase, a ministry official had said. Many must have found it unacceptable after experiencing it was like to live in the free world, knowing that the economic situation had worsened and the internal controls strengthened in North Korea, the official said. The ministry said further details could not be given for safety reasons. Obviously, you can't give anything away. The most cited reason for defection in 2023 was dissent towards the ruling Kim regime, said South Korean officials, following a lack of food and hunger in North Korea, which had previously been the most cited reason in recent years. While millions of North Koreans live in impoverished conditions under the dynastic dictatorship of leader Kim Jong-un, the country's wealthy elite, such as senior government officials and their families, reportedly have access to luxuries such as air conditioning, coffee, and even smartphones, though the phones can only access heavily censored government-run internet. These residents most likely live in the capital Pyongyang, where a privileged few enjoy facilities like cinemas, department stores, and indoor gyms. A majority of those who entered South Korea last year had in fact left North Korea years ago, staying in third countries for a long time before making the journey to Seoul, said the ministry, adding that the diversification of defection routes significantly a very tough situation within North Korea. Many defectors through North Korea's border into China, crossing the Yalu River that separates the two countries after entering China, may cross the border illegally into Lagos or Myanmar and then head for the South Korean embassy in those countries or continue through to Thailand. See, that's even extremely dangerous in of itself, especially if the Chinese authorities know that you're from North Korea, because they still have those agreements in place. It's very important for people to be aware. If you're caught by the Chinese state, they will send you back to North Korea. While the South Korean government is working to support the settlements of North Korean defectors entering the country, it is closely watching the possibility that the number of defectors could gradually increase if North Korea opens its borders with China, said the ministry. China, a close ally of Pyongyang, doesn't consider North Korea defectors to be refugees. Instead, sees them as illegal economic migrants under the border agreement with North Korea, and it forcibly deports them. Once back in North Korea, defectors face possible torture, sexual violence, hard labour, imprisonment and political or re-education camps, or even execution by the North Korean state, according to activists. Yeah, this is like I said. If they are caught by the Chinese state, the punishment is extremely, extremely severe, guys. It's really brutal. It's incredibly scary for them. I really, really feel for them. But I will say, in terms of one positive thing, is that if North Korea does slowly start opening things up, it allows more people the opportunity to flee the country and return to and basically find refuge in South Korea. So let us hope that continues for them. I mean, yeah, North Korea, just not a place for them. We don't hear, it is the most isolated country in the world. So we really don't know what goes on in the country, no matter how much people say. It's only those who come out of it can give us the best of information. So let's break things up a little bit before we look at the last three articles, guys. A little bit of foil and arms here. I hope you guys enjoy this one. This entitled the current rental markets.
Originally a holding cell for illegal immigrants, it's recently been refurbished to the highest order.
It looked bigger in the photos.
Yes, it did.
Where's the bed?
Just up there, there's a bar you hoist your feet in under, hang down upside down with your arms crossed, happy out.
Right.
Yes, we had a family of bats living in here a few years ago. They seem to really enjoy it.
What's the rent?
It's $900 per month, excluding water charges.
Where does the water come in?
Now, I think you're going to love this, right?
Okay.
There is none.
Well, how are you meant to cook or shower?
Well, not many people realise this, but after 6 months, the human body practically washes itself.
I don't think that's true.
Well, what do you expect for $9.50 a month, mate?
You said $900 a month.
Yes, well, I just got off the phone from the landlord there a second ago, and he said something about market value.
Market value?
Yeah, it was difficult to hear. He was out in his yacht. The reception wasn't great. You know yourself. And also his accent's a bit funny, because he hasn't been back to Ireland in about 20 years.
What's crime like in the area?
Oh, it's the best.
When you say the best?
And proximity to public transport in this property is second to none.
The next station is Round. Please take your ticket and your change.
Is there a fridge?
No, but to be honest, it gets so cold in here in the winter that you wouldn't need one.
Morning.
Jesus!
This is Vincent, your roommate.
How are you?
I thought you said this was a one bed.
Come on, mate, what do you expect for $1,200 a month?
1,200?
Yes, and that's guaranteed for the next 5 minutes.
Right, I'll take it.
Well, all I need from you now is 10 months rent, 2 years internet history, your junior cert results, and of course, the deposit.
What?
Brilliant, well I'll pop this in formaldehyde for you now, and you'll get it back a month after you move out, okay?
Vincent.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
The loopholes, the what you have to go through, guys, to get rent accommodation in the United Kingdom is nothing short of bonkers. That is for sure. Full credit to Foil and Arms. Check out their channel if you're not already a subscriber. Hit the like, share, and all that kind of stuff on that video if you have not already. For some reason, no, I did not like it beforehand. I don't know why. I'm pretty sure I did see it beforehand, but I've done it now, guys. I've done it now. And while you're here, guys, if you can, let me just getting this set up for you guys. And of course, guys, while you're here, if you can support me, you can do by hitting that like button. I greatly appreciate it. Share this across social media and hit that bell notification icon so that you will be notified the next time I upload another video. So the next one we got is from AP News, guys. So the headline is NATO's holding its biggest exercise in decades next week, involving around 9,000 personnel. So what is this huge exercise that NATO are holding? Well, let's read into it, guys. So NATO will launch its biggest military exercise in decades next week with around 90,000 personnel to take part in months of drills aimed at showing the alliance can defend all of its territories up to its border with Russia, top officers said on Thursday. The exercise comes as Russia's war on Ukraine bogs down. NATO as an organisation is not directly involved in the conflict except to supply Kiev with non-lethal support, although many member countries have weapons and ammunition individually or in groups and provide military training. In the months before President Vladimir Putin ordered Russian troops into Ukraine in February 2022, NATO began beefing up security on its eastern flank with Russia and Ukraine. It's the biggest alliance build-up since the Cold War. The war games are meant to deter Russia from targeting a member country. The exercises, dubbed Steadfast Defender 24, will show that NATO can conduct a sustainable, complex, multi-dominant operations over several months, including thousands of kilometre miles from the high north to Central and Eastern Europe in any condition, the 31-nation organisation had said. Troops will be moved in and around Europe until the end of May in what NATO describes as a stimulus emerging conflict scenario and a near-peer adversary. Under NATO's new defensive plans, its chief adversaries are Russia and terrorist organisations. The alliance will demonstrate its ability to reinforce the Euro-Atlantic area via transatlantic movement of forces from North America, NATO's Supreme Allied Commander U.S. General Christopher Cavey told reporters. Cavey said he will demonstrate our unity, our strength and our determination to protect each other. The chair of the NATO Military Committee, Admiral Bob Buer, said that it's a record number of troops that we can bring to bear and have an exercise within that size across the alliance, across the ocean, from the US to Europe. Bayer described it as a big change compared to the troop numbers exercising just a year ago. Sweden is expected to join NATO this year and will also take part. The UK's Defence Secretary Graham Sharps said that the government in London would send 20,000 troops backed by advanced fighter jets, surveillance planes, warships and submarines, with many deployed in Eastern Europe from February to June. So this is going to be a huge exercise. So probably by the time you guys see this article, they will conduct this exercise. But what does this basically mean? This is basically NATO need to show that they need to show their strength, essentially, is what they need to do. Because if NATO is to remain as strong as it is, as the unity of America and and all the nations as part of it, they have to show that, with all the countries united behind it. Now, obviously, we know that there are questions about if Trump becomes president, what's going to happen with the US relationship with NATO, and we'll cross that path when that happens. But I think this exercise is really good to show a strength of all the nations together and united, saying that they will stand up to Russia if Russia does try to attack one of its NATO countries and allies, because that trust and that protection of support for each other is vital. It's really, really important that countries are not succumb and not fallen under Russia. Now, I've heard Trump say about NATO that it should not be used, that it's not being used right, and that it shouldn't be a case of people protecting nations. Well, why should an entire what else is I don't see why he's saying that, because there are nations that cannot simply defend themselves, they cannot look after themselves. If Ukraine was a member of NATO, none of this would have happened, and Finland, only reason Finland are joining this is not because they want to be known as the West. They want to be a neutral country, but they've been forced to do this because of fears of being attacked by Russia. That's the absolute truth. They don't want to lose the territories that they've held, and that they've had many conflicts with Russia, and they want to keep things at peace. And by them joining NATO as well, joining NATO, they significantly reduce any chances of Russia engaging with them. And that's the same with a lot of countries on the Baltic states, Estonia, Lithuania, those on the borders with Russia as well. They feel a sense of security by being part of NATO, and this exercise is showing their strength. And I think it's really important that we are aware of that, and hopefully the support from all the nations stays strong. So this next one here, you guys, is an exclusive from NBC News. So the headline is "Inside the Effort to Create a Far-Reaching U.S. Saudi-Israeli Pact to End the War." So the U.S. and Saudi Arabia are pushing for a broad plan, but a key issue is the creation of a Palestinian state, a step many Israelis are hesitant to take after Hamas October the 7th attack. So just a bit of context here. So Saudi Arabia have been one of the things that Saudi Arabia, the family that owns that basically owns the nation of Saudi Arabia, they've been in power for a long time. They have a lot of enemies, Saudi Arabia. There are a lot of enemies around them, and they've also created a lot of backed nations as well to keep themselves in power for such a long time. We know that they're not. We know that they have. They have issues with regards to human rights and the rights of women and that, and we do want that to improve. But this one of the reasons why that the Saudis are coming closer to having some kind of formal pact or alliance or agreements with Israel is simply to keep the US on their side. Saudi Arabia are, for all intents and purposes, for the money and the wealth that they have made off the oil banks that they have in the country, they rely quite heavily at the moment on US protection. And if the US are pushing them to form a relationship of sorts with Israel, they're going to kind of start pushing that way, because they need America. They really do need America there in the Middle East. They are surrounded by enemies, and they will not want to compromise that relationship. They really don't. They're not at a point. Saudi Arabia are not at a point where they can defend themselves against so many enemies. They have invested a lot in military. They've put a lot of investment, bought lots of military over the past 10 years to really beef up their military, and they need to protect themselves. But that doesn't mean to say that that things can't turn for the worst for them. So they really so I think that is playing a part in this too. But one thing that Saudis will want is they will want the Palestinian state to be recognised, and they want Israel to kind of step back with regards to this war in Gaza. At least that's the perception of what we have as well. Yeah, there's a lot to dive into here, guys. So 11 days ago, Senator Lindsey Graham arrived for a private meeting in a lavish tent with ruby red rugs and a low bungalow cushions in the western Saudi Arabian oasis town of Al Nuna, home to ancient Nubian ruins. The tent is guarded by layers of Saudi security that protect the winter camp of Crown Mohammed bin Salman. Graham, a South Carolina Republican, was a participant in a series of high-stakes meetings with the Crown Prince in recent weeks involving American lawmakers and diplomats hoping to rekindle a potential treaty between Saudi Arabia, Israel and the United States. Their ambitious goal is to hammer out a framework for concluding the Israel-Hamas war, stabilizing the Middle East and paving the way for some form of Palestinian self-governance in the Gaza Strip. The big question is, will the Israeli government and the Israeli public accept a path to Palestinian state in exchange for American-backed peace treaty with Saudi Arabia? Despite months of Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and hardline members of his right-wing coalition publicly dismissing the idea of a Palestinian state after the October the 7th Hamas terrorist attack, A normalization deal with Saudi Arabia that nears the end of the Israel-Hamas war is seen as a potential political win for Netanyahu, according to 6 people familiar with the talks. Any deal for normalization with Saudi Arabia right now would be a major win, politically speaking, for Netanyahu and an exit strategy, said Naval Errol, a columnist for the Israeli paper Yekut. That's one thing as well. If Israel and Saudi Arabia come on terms, they will end up working together to help deal with some of the enemies that they have around them as well. But I would not call it the enemy of my enemy is my friend, because people within, families within Saudi Arabia do not approve of, let's be clear here, families within Saudi Arabia do not approve of Israel. They do not approve of the state of Israel in any way, shape or form being there. It's very important to understand that as well. Plans are being discussed by the Saudis, US and Israeli officials to provide a framework for rebuilding Gaza with significant support from neighbouring Arab countries, establishing moderate Palestinian leadership for Gaza, as well as ratifying a defence treaty between the US and Saudi Arabia that will provide an alliance against their mutual foe Iran. According to people familiar with the talks, Saudi Arabia has insisted that any plan, including a realistic pathway to a Palestinian state. An advisor for the member of Israel's war cabinet, who asked not to be named, said, "If the Saudis come with a deal that is good for Israel, of course we will vote for it." The advisor and other Israeli officials cautioned that America's push is premature because the Israeli public is not ready to discuss Palestinian states in the wake of the worst terrorist attack in Israel's history. The subject of a Palestinian state is too hot to touch in Israel right now, said a second senior Israeli government official. People are talking about the war and the hostages, not rewarding the Palestinians. It's also unclear when and how the war will even end. The political obstacles in all 3 countries are significant, while Saudi Arabia is seen as a potential leader in an effort to create stability in the Gaza. The Gulf states reportedly hoping to secure civilian nuclear technology agreements that would need the approval of US Congress, according to a former US national security official. Moreover, Saudi Arabia's insistence that any deal with it a realistic pathway to a Palestinian state, echoed by the Secretary of State Antony Blinken, would be continuous in Netanyahu's right-wing coalition. Saudi's officials did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Despite significant challenges that could derail this deal, if any talks move forward, there will likely be more meetings in the Crown Prince's tent in the coming months. The American push for the deal with Saudi Arabia and Israel aims to build on Abraham's Accords with established relations between Israel and the UAE, Bahrain, Monaco and Sudan in 2020. Well, Sudan is in a bit of a crisis right now. We haven't talked about them for a while, but as right now, nothing has really changed in the country, I'm sad to say, guys. The Abraham Accords was the first great step, but Saudi-Israeli normalization is really the brass ring, said Michael Sinks, Managing Director at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy and a former Senior Director for Middle East Affairs at the National Security Council. Saudi Arabia is the most influential nation in the Muslim world, and it's an incredibly important state in the Middle East because of its size and its wealth. Central to this push has been Graham, who has visited Saudi Arabia 3 times in the last 12 months. Israel and American officials familiar with the deal said there is a push to get it done while Joe Biden is in office to secure Democratic votes for a U.S. Saudi security treaty, while Graham can deliver the Republican votes to reach the 67 needed to ratify in the Senate. This is the side of Lindsey Graham that you don't hear about. Graham first travelled to Israel to discuss the deal with Israeli leaders and held a closed-door meeting with Netanyahu on January the 4th. "I'm more dedicated now to bring stability to your country in this region. I think Iran's goal is to destroy your efforts and reconcile with the Arab world," Graham said to reporters in Israel following the meeting. "It's an absolutely essential ingredient to be better, more stable Middle East and a safe and secure Israel and a prosperous Palestinian people." That is one thing that is important, is the blood. We talked so much about Israel and Gaza and how much things really do need to stop there. They really do. From Israel, Graham made his way to the tent in Al Uda to meet with the Prince Mohammed. After the discussion, Graham tweeted that the Saudi Crown Prince, under the right circumstances, is still interested in normalising relations with Israel. After the meeting with Graham, the Saudi Foreign Minister, in a January the 7th post on X, said that the Crown Prince and the Senator had discussed regional and international developments and issues of shared interest. The post included a photo of the Crown Prince hosting Graham, the US Ambassador to Saudi Arabia. Michael Rakiti, Jeffrey Tamos, CEO of the hedge fund of Eminent Capital, and Oren Eskai, president of Taupin's Foundations. Taupin's and ASDA are the foundations of the N7 Initiative, an organization that convened the first multilateral government meetings of U.S., Israel, and Arab senior government officials following the signing of the Abraham Accords. Several days after Graham's visit, Blinken travelled to Al Utah to meet with the Prince Mohammed as part of his regional trip that included meeting with Netanyahu and the leaders of other Arab nations. A bipartisan Senate Intelligence Committee delegation led by Committee Chair Mark Warner Dava that included senators also visiting the Crown Prince tent in January. They also met with senior security officials of Saudi Arabia, Jordan and Israel, according to persons familiar with the delegation's trip. In the wake of meetings with the American Saudi Arabia's ambassador to the United Kingdom, Prince Khalid bin Barma said publicly that the possibility of Saudi normalizations with Israel remains alive if the conclusions of the Israel-Hamas war brings with it a realistic path to the creation of a Palestinian state. We were close to normalizations, therefore close to a Palestinian state, Barna told the BBC, referring to the momentum that was building towards normalization of the Saudi-Israeli relations before the October 7th Hamas terrorist attack. One does not come without the other, the sequencing of how that is managed and what is being discussed. The normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel has been years in the making. I was in Prime Minister Netanyahu's office 4 years ago, and there was a note from the King of Saudi Arabia recount Israel's broadcast. Journalist Ahmed Segal in Jerusalem, where he made the speech to the US Congress about the dangers of Iran's nuclear proliferation. The Saudis saw it, and we think that we can be partners. I'm going to leave it there, but the article will be in the description if you guys want to read the rest of it. It's fascinating on one hand, but the other time it's like there was someone, I've heard one or two rumours, and obviously I'm just going to be stating some rumours here, guys, before I say this. Some people are stating that the Hamas attack was prolificated allegedly by the Israeli government itself in order to keep the relations like this. Those are rumours, conspiracy theories, but I have heard that Israel allowed these attacks to happen when they did. Don't know if it's true or not. I'm just going to put that out there for you guys, and you guys can decide for yourself whether you want to believe it or not. Unfortunately, the last story we have is regarding the war on Gaza, unfortunately. But before we go to that, guys, if you want to financially support me in the work that I do on this channel, you can do so by becoming a YouTube member for just 99p. It really does make a difference, and it really does help support me and the work that I do here. But if you don't want to do that, you can also financially support me or check out some of my other content on Rumble or on Patreon. Both of them, links for them are in the description. It's definitely worth checking it out, guys. So this last one is from Middle Eastern Eye, and it's something that I have been looking at very closely with regards to the war on Gaza. Let me just make sure I've got the right... apologies, I haven't got the right one on. So the headline is Israel blames Hamas for 23,000 Palestinian deaths at the ICJ. So Israel's legal representatives argue that there is no genocide taking place in Gaza as they deny Israel's bombed hospitals. So this is about the International Court of Justice, the case that South Africa has against Israel. And I haven't had a chance to cover Israel's argument on the side of it. Now, I said on the Snowflake Corner when we covered South Africa's side, I said to people, let's wait and hear Israel's case. I have not watched the whole of it, but I've watched a quite good decent chunk of it. And whether you want to believe it or not, there are some compelling arguments in it, but that doesn't mean that there are some arguments that make sense, but there are also some that don't make sense as well. So it's kind of a two-way street with what Israel said. That being said, there is to blame Hamas for the 23,000 Palestinian deaths is nonsense when we have literally seen clips and footages of Israel causing these atrocities. We have seen it. We have seen the footage. Journalists who are going out of their way to do their jobs have been killed by Israelis. We have seen Israeli hostages being unintentionally killed by the IDF as well. I'm going to be drinking a lot of water because my voice is going, guys, so I do apologise. So we have seen these. But is what Israel doing enough to contradict the word of a genocide? That is what this international the ICJ is debating, is whether or not it is genocidal what they have done. That is the key point. It's not the case that we all know that innocent lives are being lost. Everyone knows that. But is it enough to call what they are doing genocide? That is the question. I think there is enough evidence to warrant it. But whether or not the ICJ will state that, we'll have to wait and see. I know many people in the comments how they strongly feel about this, and I understand that. But yeah, I am going to kind of sit a little bit on the fence. I'm not going to BS you guys. So Israel's legal representative says Hamas is responsible for the 23,000 Palestinians that have been killed by the Israeli bombing in Gaza. Speaking during their response to South Africa's genocide case at the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, on Friday, they argued that there is no genocide in the besieged enclave and that the death toll was due to Hamas embedding itself among the civilian population. They also claimed that Israel has been allowing some food and water into the strip, which shows that Israel remains bound by its international and legal obligations, especially as a party to the Genocide Convention. This comes as the United Nations Humanitarian Office deplores Israel's systematic refusal to grant aid access to northern Gaza. Israel presented its case a day after Pretoria pleaded with judges to issue an interim order demanding Israel halt its offensive in the embattled territory. In his opening statement for Israel, the legal advisor for the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Tal Becker, said that Israel is in a war of defense against Hamas in response to the October 7th attack, and that South Africa's request for Israel to stop attacking Gaza cannot stand. The Israeli advocate rejected South Africa's description of the suffering in Gaza as unparalleled and unprecedented. What is unparalleled is the degree in which Hamas has entrenched itself in the civilian population, he said, adding that Hamas has systematically and unlawfully embedded its military operations via its NSS throughout Gaza. Becker said that South Africa is attempting to weaponise the term genocide against Israel, and that the case made yesterday ignored the wholesale massacre committed by Hamas on October the 7th that killed around 1,200 Israelis. The entirety of this case hinges on the deliberate, acutely decontextualised and manipulative destruction of the reality of current hostilities, he has said. He did not address the detail of the genocide claims that South Africa says Israel is committing in its assault on Gaza. The South Africa filing was astonishing in its clarity, detail, legal argument and impact, Andrew Featherstone, a fellow South African former politician, told Middle Eastern Eye. In 23 years of researching militarization, the arms trade and conflict, I've never seen a more compelling documentation of violence and international law and genocide, he said. There is no genocide. Malcolm Shaw, Israel's next legal representative, concluded that there is no genocide, as evidence of Israel's genocidal intent is lacking, while its intention to defend itself certainly exists. They have to. The thing is about the case, guys, before I go any further, is what is the definition of genocide? That is the definition here. And the thing is, a lot of things that have happened, Israel can turn around and say that it was an accident, or they're investigating it, or they're looking into it. They have to prove without a shadow of a doubt. And there's no question that there is evidence to suggest that what they've done is genocide. There is evidence there. But my question is to you guys in the comments. Has there been enough evidence for the ICJ to unilaterally agree that what Israel is doing is genocidal? Is there enough of it? He added, any attempts to reduce civilian death have gone unnoticed and mitigate against allegations of genocidal intent. He said that if Israeli forces acted unlawfully during the assault on Gaza, their actions would be dealt with by Israel's robust and independent legal system. In October, Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said, "We will eliminate everything. Gaza won't return to what it was before." The third lawyer to represent Israel, GALIT, blames extensive civilian deaths in Gaza on Hamas strategy and embedded itself in the civilian population. There have been many. I've even seen footage of innocent people being shot by Israel. Just want to point that out there. You can't blame all of this on Gaza. There's been a lot of evidence to suggest that they have little to no care about the people of Palestine. Numerous interviews and cases by those in government in Israel. Urban warfare will always result in tragic death, harm and damage, Rogan said. But in the case of Gaza, she argued, this was exaggerated because they were a desired outcome of Hamas. She claimed that Hamas uses hospitals for military purpose, saying that there was evidence of Hamas activities in every single hospital searched by Israel. Despite evidence to the contrary, Rogan claims that Israel have not bombed hospitals and that any damage or harm occurred as a result of hostilities in the vicinity of hospitals. Again, this has been debunked. We have seen evidence of them by the IDF on numerous occasions. So that's a hard one for them to argue. Omri Center, another representative for Israel, said that South Africa failed to mention Israel's extraordinary efforts to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Well, how are you improving it by not allowing aid to pass in, which is what the UN is saying? Secondly, you're turning off the taps and electricity in the Gaza Strip as well, which you control. So that's very hard for them to that's another thing that I'm finding very hard for them to prove. He claimed that the number of food trucks entering the besieged enclave have increased in recent weeks and that access to water was a priority for Israel. If it was a priority, you would have turned it on ages ago. The United Nations Humanitarian Office said on Friday that Israel authorities were systematically denying it access to northern Gaza to deliver aid, and this significantly hindered the humanitarian operations there. South African lawyer Hindler Hassan told judges at The Hague on Thursday that genocides are never declared in advance, but this court has the benefit of the past 13 weeks of evidence showing incontrovertible a pattern of conduct and relative intention that justifies a deplorable claim of genocidal acts. Israel deployed 6,000 bombs per week. No one is spared, not even newborns. UN chiefs have described it as a graveyard for children, she said. Nothing will stop the suffering except the order from this court. South Africa submitted this case against Israel at the ICJ last month, and they said Israel's actions in Gaza are genocidal in character because they are intent to bring about the destruction of a substantial part of the Palestinian national, racial and ethnic group. Another South African lawyer at the hearing, Tabika, I can't pronounce that second name, I apologise, said Prikora was not alone in drawing attention to Israel's genocidal rhetoric. They said at least 15 UN special rapporteurs and 21 members of the UN working groups have warned that what is happening in Gaza reflects a genocide in the making. He added that genocidal intent was evident in the way Israel's military was conducting attacks, including the target of family homes and civilian infrastructure. Israeli political leaders, military commanders and persons holding official positions have systematically in explicit terms declared their genocidal intent, he added. Nakabaki said the genocidal rhetoric had become common with the Israeli Knesset, with several MPs calling for Gaza to be wiped out, flattened, erased and crushed. We have seen those rhetorics being made by MPs. On Wednesday, Nasserin Volgil, a member of the Israeli ruling party linked with, said the privilege of his country to appear at The Hague, as he doubled down on earlier remarks when he said there are no innocent people in Gaza. Well, we've seen again, it's very hard to make that claim. During Thursday's proceeding, Professor Max Dupiskis, another lawyer representing South Africa, said Israel has subjected the Palestinian people to oppressed and prolonged violation of their rights to self-determine for more than half a century. The Dupiskis added that based on material shown before the courts, the act of Israel are plausible characteristics as genocidal. South Africans' obligations is motivated by the need to protect Palestinians in Gaza and their absolute right not to be subjugated to genocidal acts, he said. Genocidal cases, which are notoriously hard to prove, can take years to resolve, but South Africa is asking the courts to speedily implement provisional measures and order Israel to cease killings and cause serious mental and bodily harm to the Palestinian people in Gaza. The court's decisions are typically recognised by members' countries, but the ICJ has few means of enforcing them. Any outcome is therefore likely to be symbolic. In 2004, the court issued a non-binary opinion that Israel's construction of its concrete barrier wall in the occupied West Bank was illegal and that should be dismantled. More than 20 years later, walls and fences are still standing. It is. I have to be very clear here that this is Middle East and I. Obviously, I have to be very clear on this, guys. You have to remember, Middle East and I are obviously more Palestinian than Israeli, obviously. So I have to put that caveat in there, even if people will get upset by that. I know you don't want me to say that, but it is. I want to make this very clear that this is the Israeli government. This is not the Israeli people. This is the government that are being accused of this, not the Israeli people. I want to make that very clear. Those who live in Israel, I'm not accusing them of this. I hope that the South African government is not accusing the people of genocide, but it's the government who are making these decisions. It is the military that are carrying out these orders and the remarks, and the MPs itself. It's very important to make that distinction, guys. It's really, really important. I don't know when the final outcome will be made, but obviously when it does, it will be how it will affect the rest of how it will affect the war. We will have to wait and see. There is a possibility that America may will step in and protect Israel from anything as well, but it is not helping their case whatsoever. But I wanted to cover Israel's side of the story, because I do believe that while there is that, obviously, the rhetoric we've heard many times that Israel does have a right to defend itself, they also have a right to have their say being told in the courts as well, which they did. Now, again, you can believe them, take their side of it or not, but I'm putting out, because I covered South Africa's side, I thought it was only right that I covered Israeli's side, even if you vehemently disagree with it, because I do believe that they should have a right to speak their side of it, even if we vehemently disagree with them. But we will wait and see how it goes, guys, because this is going to be one going for a while. And on that, guys, we've come to the end of the World News Round. What did you guys think of some of the stories that I covered today? I did cover quite a bit with regards to things in the Middle East and a little bit in Asia. Not so much anything in Europe on this one, guys. I'm sorry I didn't really have anything really to tackle, I would say, on this. But let me know, guys, about some of the stories I covered, what you guys' thoughts on some of them. Be greatly appreciated. If you've watched all the way through, thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. But just before you click out, if you can hit the like button, be greatly appreciated. Share it across social media, hit that bell notification icon so you'll be notified when I upload another video. And if you want to financially support me, you can do so by joining me on YouTube membership for just 99p, just as little as 99p. You can be a YouTube member supporting the work that I do here. And also, if you want to get additional content, you can do that either on my Rumble or on Patreon. You can get exclusive content on them as well, guys. So thanks so much for watching, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.